scene is one that runs on adrenaline, coffee, and pure ambition. We heard Casey's ambition and Johanna's ambition there earlier on. And it can be exciting and sometimes stressful, but overall very rewarding. What, if anything, can large corporations learn from those starting out, and what are the benefits of a collaboration between the two? We have a fantastic panel of experts on the stage, so I do ask, ladies and gentlemen, once again, if you could please take your seats as our panel is about to kick off, and it's going to be led by Johanna Nafka, Manager of High Potential Startups at Enterprise Ireland. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you for the introduction. So, just very quickly, myself, I'm Niall McAvoy. I manage the High Potential Startup ICT team in Enterprise Ireland. And many people in the room will be familiar with EI. We're a very significant investor and supporter of startups in the Irish market. We've got a great panel here today to discuss the topic of collaboration and support between startups and multinationals. And I'm going to ask all the panelists to introduce themselves shortly, but maybe just for a little bit of context. According to a 2014 study, 88% of corporates believe that it's necessary to collaborate with startups in order to stay innovative. Although many see the potential, very few succeed in fostering a long-term success with this situation. So we have on the panel, we've a combination of VC, founder network, and the Startup Accelerator Manager from a multinational. So without further ado, I'm just going to ask each of the panelists to say a little bit about themselves.
Hi everybody, so I'm Anna Ravalona, founder and CEO of Global Investor. So we are a platform to help female founders learn about funding, get funded faster, and build their businesses.
Okay. Hi, I'm Tom Borby. I work at Cedars, a leading pan-European crowdfunding platform. Today we've helped fund over 600 businesses with over 400 million euros being invested into campaigns on Cedars.
Hi everyone, my name is Marina Travisari. I run Oracle's Startup Accelerator in the UK and we're based in Bristol.
Thank you. Marina, I'm going to go to you first.
Okay.
From a corporate perspective, what are the main benefits of collaboration with a startup?
Co-innovation and mindshare. So it's exploring new ideas, it's new agile agility in thinking. It's corporates have a very set way of working, and they're just not it's kind of building up that co-collaboration and the co-innovation, where we're creating a win-win situation with the startups, where I think big corporates have a way of kind of a slow way or a kind of rigid way of thinking. And if we're working with our enterprise customers, we want to be showing the new innovative products, the new innovative ways of thinking, the ways of going to market. So if we can work with startups, then that's showing that the corporates are innovative, but it's also then we're brokering that co-innovation and collaboration with the startups. So they're trying to break our technology. It's kind of that win-win situation between the two.
What is it about corporates that, and how true is it that they feel that I suppose a shortage of innovation within their own framework? Is it the culture? Is it how the entity behaves? How the entity embraces innovation? Because many corporates were, of course, once at their heart deeply innovative organisations, and yet so many feel that goes stale. Is that at the core of why?
I think it can be. I think the bigger a company grows, you lose that innovative way or the agility. That's what I was saying earlier. It's sort of, startups can think fast, they can move fast. Within a corporate, things are slower and take a lot more time. There are processes in place that can be difficult to navigate. It's giving, I think, in Oracle we do give, our team members the opportunity to come with fresh new ideas. But I think there's something about being a startup and being involved with a startup that brings something completely different. And I think within Oracle, our accelerator program is very much like a startup itself. So we're ourselves kind of navigating that minefield of this huge corporate and breaking down doors, which is, I think if you've been with a corporation for a very long time, 15, 20 years, which a lot of people have within Oracle, you tend to lose that freshness of thinking. So I think that's one of the benefits, for sure.
Okay.
Sorry, if I could go on. It's about the people in the organisation and the corporates. If you've been there for 25 years, if the leaders and the kind of people with directing the company aren't looking to actually disrupt, not just innovate, but disrupt, you can talk the talk, but can they actually walk the walk? And you meet a number of corporates who go, yeah, we're innovating, but do they have an accelerator? Do they have an innovation team? They might have an innovation team, but do they actually have the power and support to actually kind of push things through the full organisation? It's rare that happens.
And in terms of pushing that through the full organisation, I mean, at Enterprise Ireland, we get lots of startups come to us where the early stage validation is a partnership, is a collaboration with a multinational. And just from an investor's perspective, and both our panels at the end here are on that side of the fence. I mean, is that a concern? Are these universally positive things, these collaborations with a multinational? And often it can be with a single multinational. How do investors view that?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I guess first off, it shows serious hustle. Trying to get in and get a place at the table with a large corporate is difficult. They have long lead time, they have multiple areas to get through. I chatted to a founder earlier, he said it took him 3 years to actually get a contract signed. 3 years, most of them are dead after that amount of time. They can't wait that long. Yeah. So whenever I see a business that says, yeah, we've got this corporate partner, that's super interesting. But at the same time, it also comes up with a lot of red flags, because a lot of corporates like to control what they collaborate with, whether that's through investment or through them as a kind of sole supplier. So what I look for kind of has, what are the terms in place on that, why they've done it, but also some corporates enforce a startup founder to pivot quite dramatically, or come up with more innovative things they want to develop, where actually they don't need to. What they're doing at the table straight off is super innovative anyway. Don't ask me to do 500 different things that'll take me another couple of months or years, and then not do anything at the end of it. Because I've seen a number of businesses that founders have gone out, they've always done innovative, collaborated, and at the end of maybe it was a year contract, 6 months, kind of proof of concept, they get left back on the street, cold and dry, with trying to remember where they ended up and what their original mission was. And yeah, it's not a great place to be at.
Well, at the same time, I'd say that's true of a lot of accelerators as well. So we have to be fair, it's not all on the head of corporate. I'd also take it from the perspective of founders. And from the founder perspective, having a partnership with a corporate is a very important thing because it is a huge validation. When a corporate actually takes you seriously and says, yes, we're going to test you, even if it's a pilot, the possibility to scale afterwards is really huge. And that's what excites the entrepreneurs. And I do think, as you say, Tom, I totally agree, a lot of entrepreneurs go in with their eyes kind of blind. I've had the opportunity to work for 22 years in my past life before being an entrepreneur, serving and working with big corporates. So I know that machine and the politics and how slow and long and heavy it is to move it. And I mean, there's great positives too, obviously, because you have the possibility to impact the world on a much bigger scale. And that's what's interesting. That's where I think the two join. It's where both the startup wants to, they have a problem they want to solve, and also the corporate at a larger scale. And bringing in the spark from the entrepreneur is what we do best, because we have to hustle. You heard about the hustling earlier on. We have to hustle. You have to hustle internally for budgets and for everything as well. I mean, it's a different type of hustling. So I think it's a huge opportunity for entrepreneurs because it proves traction. And so if you get one brand name up and say, wow, if that company has backed them or even done a pilot, has done some first round.
Can I just say, just pick up on that, the point of the pilot, because there is a danger that the startup can become paralysed by the pilot. And there's differing points of view on whether the pilot should be paid for or not. I mean, where do you sit with regards to maybe go out to you, Corinne, in terms of a young underfunded startup who clearly has innovation at their core, who wants to deploy it in Oracle, but maybe you don't have the budget to do it, but they're still very keen to do it. Is there a misalignment can emerge quite quickly there?
I don't, because we're quite robust in our selection process, so we only have space for 5 startups within each centre. So we're quite mindful about who we're taking on. And if, you know, we ask for an MVP, and they've been going for at least 6 months, and a lot of our startups are more, I would say, more scale-up than pure startup. So we've not asked any of our startups to pivot at all. And we're very conscious that, you know, any IP that's created, any co-innovation is owned by the startup, not by Oracle. So I don't think I'm the best place to kind of probably answer that question per se.
Tom, if you've seen lots of companies raising money, you know, this would be the key thing. Look at us, we're working with Microsoft, or we're working with IBM, or wherever it might be. Is there a risk there that, you know, that unpaid pilots can just drag with a lack of commitment there from the point of view of the collaboration?
I'm always a bit anti-paying to be a pilot, which you hear occasionally. I mean, sometimes you read about, you know, involved in that a corporate will invest in the business, and then they will then go on to a pilot, which is that paying for a pilot potentially. But I think pilot is important. As I said, it validates your business. You can learn a hell of a lot from the people in the corporate world. If they're your customer, then their feedback is vital. But then it's looking at, you know, what else is in the market and learning and really tapping into the resources and just making sure that corporate has facilities to help you. And it's a partnership at the end of the day. If they're treating you like a supplier, it's not going to work. But if you're treating them like a cash cow, it's not going to work either. You need to go as a collaboration, as a partnership, and make sure, you know, you're learning this as much as they're learning from you.
Can I just go a little bit off piece there in terms of something you said, that maybe the corporate actually invests, takes an equity position in the company. Good or bad thing?
It depends. I think it depends. I think it's a good thing if that's what you want, if that's what the startup wants. Because often corporates will invest in a startup with a view to acquiring them. That's usually right, if they want to bring in the innovation. What they usually do is saying, this is what we'd like to acquire because it feeds into our own portfolio or new kind of line of business. So again, you need to kind of be careful, because I know a lot of corporate VCs, so they have venture arms. We were talking about this earlier with Tom. So they have venture arms, and at the same time, like traditional VCs sometimes look at corporate VCs and go, because even corporate VCs take a long time to make decisions and they can stall the final closing. So it's important to know all these things, to go in with your eyes wide open and know what you want. So if I would say that, it's like, choose the corporates that you want to partner with. You know exactly what you want from them and how you can bring something of value to them. That's equal partnership.
Okay, moving along. They don't all work out. Tom, when they fail, when these collaborations fail, what have you seen as being the main reasons behind the failure?
Yeah, that's quite a difficult question. I mean, there's lots of variants. I think one is alignment. So corporates have, you know, their team have KPIs, expectations put upon them to get budget. And what happens is, I think both parties don't do enough due diligence on the others. Startups go here, they have this amazing customer with deep pockets going, yeah, come on board, we want to invest, we'll collaborate with you. Brilliant, right, that's made my day fantastic, let's go head on into it. Without having thought about, is it something that's right for our business? Is it something that's actually going to help us grow or hinder us? Can we even fulfill the brief? You know, they're partnership because they need to do something, whether it's your fintech and it's helping out with some accountancy software for their kind of SMEs. Is your business designed to do that? And you can, as we touched on earlier, blood, sweat and tears go into trying to solve the problem. After 6 months, you can't do it, it doesn't work. And then, the corporate's not particularly happy with you, you're not particularly happy with what's happened, and it all falls apart. So it's really kind of an alignment of expectations and doing enough research on each other. And, and speaking to corporates, if they've done it before, speak to the companies that have worked with them and collaborated with them, understand, how that's worked. That's how investors would do due diligence on you as a business. They'll speak to
And how you as a founder should do due diligence on the investor. You need to talk to their portfolio companies and what are they like as an investor, what were they like in the dance beforehand and then after the marriage. So it's good to know.
I'm reading an article, in terms of, you work through the accelerator with startups. Any particular learnings that you could that you would point to as to where it didn't commercialise? What's the most common factors at play here for you?
Well, we've only just come to the end of our first cohort, so we're still working with the startups that from that first cohort within the UK. So and they've all had enterprise customer connects. They're doing really well. So we haven't had any failures at the moment. I would say in terms of process, what doesn't work. think I'll go back to the fact there's that laborious kind of process of kind of the big machine that you have to navigate, and the expectations on the startup. They're very lean, they're on the ground, they're running their business to keep the lights on, you know, and they're getting their products up and running. And they don't want to be spending time filling out paperwork, doing all the legal. Yes, obviously we need, you know, an NDA, we need the paperwork right and watertight, but make it simple for the startup, make it work for the startup. One of the things that I do at our accelerator is, yes, I work for Oracle, but I have the startup's best interest at heart. So I'm the gatekeeper. And you can imagine Oracle's a huge machine, and it's a huge sales machine as well. So lots of people want to be working with the startups because it helps them with their sales. If it's not right for the startup, then they don't get access. End of.
So being part of the accelerator obviously comes with a fair amount of structure and access, and proper access to the right people in the organisation. Yes. One of the things I've come across quite a lot is where I think there's an inevitable that are, you know, that are going to make a decision. Yeah. And I mean, is that common?
Absolutely. I think that a lot of startups get things well. I got a paid pilot, a very small amount of money for this big gazillion dollar company. And I said to them, my gosh, it's taken us 12 months to actually get the contract. I said, that is so fast. It only takes us 18 months. And I'm like, oh my God, you know. So I think for startups, you need to go in and ask a lot of questions as to who are the key decision makers. Ask about the decision making process. I think we get so excited about the end goal of having that brand as a partner and that logo on our desk for future investment that we forget. And also to understand the challenges of the corporate, because it's a big political machine. You know, you have people in front of you who are your partners, and they will really do their best for you. And sometimes they always have bosses and other people to account to, and it can be very tricky. And that's where I often say to them, listen, work with me, use me as your partner in those discussions, because you'll get asked some questions, and that if I'm the startup, I can answer them very effectively to help relay some fears or qualms or questions. So actually, really trying to work closely as a partner is very important.
Absolutely. And I think I'd add to that as well. The startups who are coming into any relationship, whether it's with an accelerator or with a corporate, be really clear of what you want and your objectives. So once you're clear of those objectives, then you know, right, this is what I want. Okay, so who do I need to speak to, and how do I get there in the quickest route?
And how much, I mean, from the corporate side, how much weight will they place on how well funded the startup is? Because obviously a lot of them are really, really early stage, and yet, you know, there's a corporate risk in engaging with companies that are potentially going to be out of gas midway through the project. How does that come into play?
Well, I mean, at Oracle we've got two programs running at the moment. So we've got the startup program and we've got our scale-up program. Both have access to very similar things, but they are nuanced. I think the startup program gives, as I said, the startups need to have an MVP, but it's giving them the opportunity and the platform to explore that, and working with engineering to ensure that their tech is robust enough to be able to scale. So we try and ensure that they don't.
Yeah, okay. And just to, it's a short panel, we're coming to the end of our 20-minute session. If I was to ask each one of you to give me, I suppose, one bit of advice that you would give to any startup dealing with a large corporate, in terms of a must do, and one thing to be most careful of, what would it be?
I would say choose wisely, meaning do your homework. Because, you know, there's an Oracle, there'll be other companies with the same family, and you might have a better culture fit with another one as well. So, you know, choose wisely, I would say that's the wise word. On the positive side, and on the negative side, know that to break into a corporate takes 18 months. It really does, 12 to 18 months. You've got to know that it's going to take that long, be patient, and not run out of steam, which is really hard. You can get very frustrated. You don't understand the corporate wheels that are going behind.
Tom?
Just on my idea.
I think we'd all second Anne's comments, absolutely.
But yeah, I think don't be afraid to quiz them. You know, particularly when you're starting out, you think, oh, this is amazing, corporate, I see them all over the newspapers, you know, they're huge, they've got offices all over the world. You know, challenge them. If they really want you, they'll reply to your questions, really do your homework, really do your due diligence on them, and you hope that relationships they'll push you back as well. And do you get a relationship, as Anne said, look around, they might not be necessarily the right partners to be partnering with. So always kind of quiz them, do your due diligence on them. And then timing also a big one, but big watch outs is go in there with your eyes open and make sure the expectations are aligned. So make sure what you're all agreeing to is actually something that you can deliver on and that they can deliver on. Otherwise, it's the point.
I absolutely agree. It's like if you're going to go for a job and you're having an interview, you have to remember to ask the questions to find out if that job's right for you. So it's the same for any working with any big corporate, any accelerator, and make sure that there is a fit, absolutely. And if you're looking for tech support, make sure that if they take equity, what are the hidden small print? So read the contract, read the small print.
And the hidden small print actually very often could be that there's restrictions on exit.
Yes.
And restrictions on who you can do business with, which is a very, very significant clause to signing up to.
Which we don't have at Oracle Accelerator, by the way. And we don't take equity.
And while Marina has the stage here, I know your current call is open, so you might just want to quickly promo there.
Thank you. We are open for applications for both of our programs, the startup program in the UK and in France. I think in Paris is open for another 2 weeks. Tel Aviv has just closed, I believe. And the scale-up program is open as well. So the scale-up is a virtual program and it's not restricted to numbers. The residential program is 5 that we select. So if you go to oracle.com/startup, you can find out more information.
Great. If I could ask you all to join me in thanking our panelists today.
Everybody. So we are going to keep things moving, but you are most welcome to continue sharing our hashtag. I know you're probably all sick of hearing me say it, but it's hashtag DTF18. And we have some great stuff still to come. We are going to welcome back Johanna Nafka, who you would have heard if you were here for the Casey Neistat panel discussion. But Johanna worked for President Obama and has such a fascinating story to tell, and she'll be back to tell that very shortly. But first we are going to welcome back one of the panelists you just heard from there, Anna Nova, CEO of Global Invest Perk.
In the words of Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'm back. So what if I told you that all of you in this room already have the power to change the world? Are you going to take that power? So come with me on the journey and I'm going to show you how. It's in your hand. Does this go forward? Yay. Okay, hands up. How many people in the room are investors? Hands up. Wow, 1, 2, 3. Okay, keep your hands up. How many of you are entrepreneurs? Okay. So imagine if all the entrepreneurs and the investors in this world and in this room came together on a joint mission, and the joint mission to actually help bring the products and services that you want into the world. And we can do it. We have to start early. The world of entrepreneurship is the key. And you start a business as an entrepreneur because there's a problem that you want to solve. And you want to solve it for specific people, and we've got to start early. I had the opportunity last year to go back to my primary school. This is my primary school over 30 years later, with BizWorld, which is an organisation that teaches entrepreneurship to 11-year-olds, so 50-year children. And it was absolutely fantastic. Over 2 days, we got to teach them about entrepreneurship. But they actually became entrepreneurs. They set up their businesses, they gave each other roles in the company, they built products on paper, and they did market research to the 10-year-olds in 4th class, and they pitched to dragons. And it was an incredible experience because on day one, when we asked the children how many of them, when they were going to secondary school, were going to choose business as a subject, out of the 28 children, only 2 hands went up. And at the end of the 2 days, they understood, hey, this business stuff is really cool. You can actually do some cool things, create incredible things. And at the end of day 2, I asked them again, and then there were over 22 hands that went up. So we have to start young. And I started young, at the tender age of 40. It's just very young, knowing that we're all going to live to be, 80-something. So at the tender age of 40, I'd always known I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I went to an event in London where a female founder was speaking. And I was in the audience where you are now. And I asked her the question, I said, what's your greatest challenge? And she said, it is access to funding. And I said, huh? You mean it's harder for women entrepreneurs to get funding than men? And it got me curious. So I started to read the research, and I found out that the funding gap, meaning the amount of money that gets raised by women versus men, that gap in between the two is currently estimated to be $300 billion. Now, to put it into context, that's the equivalent of 3/4 of the value of Facebook. Now, that actually made me quite angry. I said, I want to do something about it, because my deepest value is equality and gender equality. So I decided, okay, what can we do to change it? And some people could see this gap as a negative thing, which it is, but I think we can change it. And I see it as an opportunity that's been lost. And it's not about taking some of that 300 million from the money that's going to the guys. It's about, actually, can we re-inject more money towards the female founders to create a bigger pie where we will all benefit? And that's really important. So why do I care? So, I don't know if you recognize this roller coaster. These are my children, my 16-year-old daughter and my 14-year-old son, and they're on the Cuchulainn roller coaster in Tato Park. And I think it's a really good visual, because imagine they're both entrepreneurs and they're starting their journey, the roller coaster, to set up their company. Today, the research shows us that my son would be 70% more likely to get funded just because of his gender. And that's something that I want to help change, and that we can all change to bring the progress we want to see in the world. So what's the problem? Well, the big problem is that women don't get the same amount of funding as men. If we look at the seed capital, which is the early stage capital that is injected in companies, only 15%, 15 goes to female-led businesses, and only 10% of venture capital goes to female-led businesses. Now, what percentage of the population are we, ladies? What percentage are we? 51%. So there's something that's not right with this picture. And if you go deeper into that 10%, it actually looks a bit worse. Because there are all female founder teams, all male founder teams, and mixed teams. And guess what? The all female founder teams only got 2.2%, which got 1.4 billion in funding last year. And the all male founder teams, they got 79% of the funding, meaning 66 billion. So 1.4 billion, 66 billion. So this gap is really true. And why is this important? Because we have to change things. And one of the key reasons that exists is because there are not enough women investors and not enough men investing in women. If we look at the number of investors, we have angel investors. So they are private investors like you and me who put our personal money into a startup. They're angels. And then we have VCs, who are the venture capitalists, who are the professional investors who are investing corporate money. And look at this. Only 8% of the venture capitalists in the world are women. So it looks like there's a correlation between that 8% and the 10% of venture capital. It's quite interesting. The figures are similar. And if you look at the number of angel investors, again, there's only about 19% of angel investors who are women. Now, I think, as I mentioned earlier, this $300 billion gap, it's an opportunity lost. And we can actually create huge value by working together on this. So, what does the word invest mean? Well, the word invest, actually, as we know it, is I put my money into a venture and I get a good return. I get financial return, I make a profit. We all get that. But the other definition of invest means to put your time, your energy, your resources into a project to get a positive result. Your time, your energy, your resources to get a positive result. And if that's the definition of investor, actually, we can all do that. We can give our time, our energy, and our resources. So how can we do it? How can you get your wings? I want you to go away after this talk with 5 key tips on how you can get your wings. And that's why I said you have the power in your hand, because there are 5 things to remember. So the first one is this. You've got the power of the purse. The power of the purse is your credit card. You get to make the decisions on where you spend your money. And guess what? I put the wallet in for the guys as well, okay? Not just the beautiful red, I love red, but you have the power, we have the power of the purse. So we can choose where we spend our money, and you can actually invest and spend your money in companies that actually create a better world for men and women, and who are gender fair. And there's an organisation called Gender Fair. They actually have an app. So they rate companies as to how well they are with regard to gender equality and to fairness. So you can actually check, if you download the app, it's free, you can actually see and learn more. So use your everyday purchasing decisions. When you're buying the next product, just think, where's the female founder who's making something similar or that I like? I need to start looking for them. So the first way you can do it, number 1, the power of the purse. The second one is to try crowdfunding. The power of the crowd. We are the crowd here today. Okay? And so, if you haven't invested before, you can try out investing and getting to learn the game on crowdfunding. So there's different types of crowdfunding. There's reward-based, donation-based, and equity-based, where you put in money and get some percentage shares. Now, we don't have that yet in Ireland. However, Crowdcube that I've shown here, they're an equity, they're the ones who created equity crowdfunding, meaning you get shares in the company. And they're based in the UK, and they do allow Irish companies to use crowdfunding. And in fact, Sue Group, one of our well-loved Irish brands, the female founder who created it, she did 2 rounds of crowdfunding on Crowdcube, one of 2 million and another of 3 million. So you can get into the game by, checking out the crowdfunding sites. Get curious, watch the videos and see how the startups, see what are the products and services that they are bringing to the world that you may not know about and you may care about. So that's the number 2. Number 3. Okay, number 3. Give differently. How many of you donate to charity? Hands up. Yeah. We are probably the biggest giving nation in the world, and we're proud to do so. And what if you gave half of the money you would give to a charity of your choice to support an association? What if you gave half of that money to a startup, and a female-led startup, who's actually working in that space? So, for example, for the Irish Cancer Society, you could give part of that money to Paya Healthcare, who have created a lingerie line of specially made bras for women who've had breast cancer. They've had breast cancer, so they've had reconstruction. So they make it with this incredible material from bamboo. And guess what? It helps the women heal faster and feel better about themselves. So you can, if you believe and you want to support breast cancer, there are female founders out there with companies who are doing things in that space. Nova Grey, that is a French-led startup. That startup is creating specialized, individualized radiation treatment. So if you need to have radiation for cancer, at the moment, you're given the same dose whether you're a man or a woman, so no matter what your weight, everybody gets basically the same dose. But Nova Grey have created the technology to allow you to get exactly what you need. Or if you believe in education, check out Unicef. We love to give to Unicef and to help the children. You could be giving money towards Outbox Accelerator, which is an accelerator to help girls in STEM, for example. Or Pharmapod, who help reduce patient errors when it comes to prescriptions. Trocra, it's one of those key ones we always give to. What if you gave to Nuritas, Nora Caldy? They're one of the best Irish startups in the world, led by a female founder. And she's basically finding the molecules that can cure diseases. So if you want to help people in Africa who are fighting malaria and so on, you could also invest in that startup. Beats Medical, so Parkinson's and so on. So give differently. The fourth way that you can change the world is to become a mentor. Remember I said earlier, if you invest, you give your time, your energy, and your resources. And one of the reasons why those big pies are different for men and women raising funding is because of our networks. So if you open up your networks and mentor women entrepreneurs, help them to break through, and be a mentor in this world. Go back to your schools. We need people who are technical people. We need developers. We need entrepreneurs. We need fintech and all the AI people to go into the schools and share your knowledge. You can do that already. So you can be a mentor. And the final way that you have the power in your hand is to start going to the startup pitches and competitions. Check them out. If you really want to learn more about the startup world, and check out the cool companies that are out there creating products and services that can make a difference, go and see them pitch. Listen to the questions that the investors are asking. And if you want to take it even further, you can actually look at angel networks like HBAN and Astia, they're specific again, where you can actually learn how to be an angel, to invest your money professionally with others. So, a wise man once said, be the change you want to create and you want to see in the world. And my message to you is this: invest in the change you want to see in the world. Invest. And one day I was running out the door to a next meeting, and my daughter said to me, "Mom, spread your talent to the world." And that really got to me. But I use it as a metaphor because everybody in this room, you all have talent. And we need you to spread your talent and invest your time and your energy, your networks, and your money to bring those products and services to the world. You can do it. So spread your talent to the world and become an investor. Thank you.
Thank you indeed for that. It's nice, inspiring message. It's always good to have a bit of inspiration this time of the day. So we're going to roll on now with our next speaker. Quick reminder, once again, if you do have any questions, comments, or some photographs of me of 7 chins with Diz come from the Casey Neistat thing, so thanks for those. Be sure to use hashtag DTS18 on Twitter. But our next speaker is going to talk about something that we've already heard quite a bit about today, and we're going to hear more about tomorrow. And that is taking an idea and a concept from a post-it note in your bedroom to a reality, to making it a product that people, actual human beings, use. And you know, how do you do that, and what do you need to take it to the next level? That is the subject of our next keynote. Please welcome to the stage Johanna Nafka, CEO of Crowdfunding.
So we're all probably pretty familiar with this product life cycle chart. And many of us are probably familiar with that grind and that uphill battle as you try to get that initial traction and that early growth and that product market fit. But the reality is that these two first phases, the introduction and the growth, actually represent a really small fraction of the overall product life cycle. The MVP that we always talk about, well, that happens right here, right at the very beginning, where it's really easy to pivot and change and all that sort of stuff. When in reality, most of us don't have the luxury of working on these greenfield, brand new products. Most of us are working on products that we've somehow adopted or taken over. They've got existing tech debt and constraints and contracts and stakeholders, and let alone the people and the politics involved. And yet, when you look at the sales volume, this is where most of the money is made. This is a really important phase for the product, and it's also where churn really starts to hurt. You know, when you're a startup and you're in this frothy new market, it's easy to mask a high churn rate, but as you hit saturation, you're going to start seeing that really start to hurt. So this is where churn really starts to kick in. And yet, what do we talk about? Like, let's look at Medium or some of those other publications. People are talking about how to launch a product, how to get product market fit, how to optimize for growth. Very few people seem to talk about maturity or, God forbid, the decline stages of your product, which is a shame because that's where it really starts to get difficult. And so at the growth stage, this is when you're talking about hitting that product market fit, trying to get that growth, trying to prove that your product has a place in the world. And at the maturity stage, you've got existing customers and new customers to cater for. You're building more than one product. You've got tech debt. You probably have this big, messy backlog that you've got to deal with as well. So needless to say, maturity comes with problems. And so one of those problems that I see a lot of companies running into is they become a feature factory. This is actually born out of what seems to be a good habit in early days, but starts catching you astray. And that's your cadence. You're building up and getting features at the door. It's easy to become addicted to features because in the early days, when you're first launching features, each new feature gets you that next 100 signups or downloads or sales or whatever it is. It's keeping you ahead of the competition. And yet, the more features you add, the more likely you are to end up with more of a Frankenstein of a product. Most people actually understand that adding more features adds complexity, and yet we seem to get stuck in this trap. And so it's important to think objectives over features, right? Think about the big problems that you're trying to solve. And most people do understand this intuitively, yet why do we keep getting stuck? Well, personally, I blame the roadmap. Now, the roadmap isn't necessarily a bad thing in itself. It's a great document for outlining your vision and the steps that you're going to take to get there. And yet so many people end up in this feature factory because of it. And so I want to implore you all to do this with me here today. Ditch your timeline roadmap. Now, this format might make you look good today. Your bosses and your board and your customers certainly love this level of certainty, all the things you're going to do. And yet it's setting you up for failure. Because if you really break this down, it's a chart. You're charting out things to do versus time. And time is on this x-axis, always marching forwards, creating this timeline. And that might seem good and easy to start with, right? You've got your first features, and you can add a few extra things in there. And it's all well and good, but the more you add in there, the more difficult it becomes to manage. Until you get something that looks a little bit like this. And the problem with this format is that because you've got that timeline along the top, always marching forwards, everything you put on that roadmap has a due date and a duration that you're putting out there, making promises on. And what you've really got is a whole bunch of features, a whole bunch of deadlines, all basically a whole bunch of assumptions stacked one on top of each other. So here's a few of the key assumptions that you're going to be running into. One is that you assume you know how long each one of these things is going to take. You've got good estimates on every last item, and that might be easy for the stuff that your developers are working on today, but for the things that you're kind of guesstimating on further in the future, they're guesstimates, right? The more you put in there, the more you're going to have to buffer or figure out how long each thing is going to take. The other assumption you're making is that you assume that there's nothing else that's going to come in here and disrupt your timeline. No new competitors, no new cool feature ideas from your customers, no new market opportunities out there. And you're also assuming that each of these features is going to work the day that you launch it. So let's say you said you're going to take 3 weeks to build out that new checkout feature that's going to get your conversion rate up. Well, when you launch it, it means it's going to be converting at exactly the amount that you said it would, right? Right. And the last assumption is that you assume that each of these features actually deserve to exist, that they are an important part of your strategy and that they deserve to be codified. And at the end of the day, you're making a pretty big assumption that nothing is going to change. And that's just never true in the world of building products, is it? So, what could possibly go wrong? Well, you've got all these made-up release dates that are scaring your developers and pushing them along to these death marches to hit these dates that you've made up, all while confusing or throwing off your salespeople and your customers of these expectations of what you're going to deliver and when, while missing potential opportunities out there, potentially building the entirely wrong thing. And that leads to us being sad product managers. We don't want that. So is there a better way? give you 3 steps to ditch that timeline and get out of that feature factory. So to start with, before you even begin looking at your roadmap, formulate your product vision. Now, the product vision is, this is a great little template that you can start with. You might recognize this as Geoffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, originally as an elevator pitch template, but it asks the right sort of questions, like who are you building for and how are you differentiating yourself? So if you don't have one, start here and make sure that this is communicated to everyone on your team. The next step is to set your objectives. Now, the purpose of objectives is to keep you focused on hitting company-level goals. Now, you might call these OKRs or KPIs. We just simply call them objectives. It doesn't matter what you call them. It's whatever works best for your team. But the point of them is to be these guardrails that keep your team pointing in the same direction, so they know what success is supposed to look like. The important thing is to focus on outcome over output. Output might just be measuring the number of story points that you deliver or number of features that you put out there, whereas outcome is measuring the actual impact that you're having on the important company metrics that you're measuring. And finally, switch out that timeline you have for these time horizons. What we've actually done here is broken it out into 3 separate buckets. So things that are in the current term are much closer to you. You've got better visibility, better granularity. You can be more specific here. These are the things that are keeping your team busy right now. You're prototyping, speccing, and validating, and building these things right now. Whereas things that you're putting into the future are much more nebulous. They're much broader in scope. You're really just putting out there problems that you want to solve, or things that you know are on the horizon that you need to tackle. At this stage, you're talking about what needs to be validated, which is a key point, because the roadmap isn't this perfect plan. The roadmap is meant to be a prototype for your strategy. So let's say you were deciding to add a new button to a page somewhere, a new feature. You might scratch that down on a piece of paper, show it to the customer, and then use their feedback. Use that piece of paper as a catalyst for conversation about whether the button's in the right place or whether it says the right thing or does the right thing. It's a prototype. You don't really care if you throw out that version. The roadmap is similar, except you're mapping out the big picture items that need to be validated, these big assumptions that you're making, so you can take that roadmap, show it to your sales team, your board, your customers, show it to people, and get the feedback as to whether you're working on the right stuff or not. And so the result, if you combine your vision, you combine that with your objectives, the things that you want to solve, and these time horizons, you get this lean roadmap. And you notice there's no timeline on here. What I've got is a series of cards that represent problems to be solved, linked to objectives, grouped into these sort of broad buckets. So this is one format that's a pretty popular format that you might see. Another one might be this sort of streams version, where you're very visibly grouping stuff by the objectives. And the important thing here is that you are taking the focus off these delivery dates, which were arbitrary and made up in the first place anyways, and changing your team's focus to solving problems. And speaking of problems, nothing stifles innovation like a to-do list as long as your arm. How many people have a Trello board or a Jira backlog that looks a little bit like this? And you know that, it's all well and good in the doing and, testing phases. You've got a certain amount of throughput there, but you've got this to-do list that's just ever growing. And you know that everything on there is not fully spec'd, ready to go for any developer to pick up and run with. It's generally this mishmash, and it freaks out your development team because they don't know whether they're supposed to start working on this stuff, and they've got this never-ending task list of things to do, most of which aren't even ready for them. And your rest of the team, your non-tech team, is freaked out because they're kind of wondering where all their ideas keep going to and disappearing into. It's down here somewhere. So the solution to this is actually remarkably simple. It's just split your backlog up into two parts, right? The strategic half and the execution half. And what I mean is that the term backlog is a pretty broad term, right? You've got, I like to think about this in 2 different sides. You've got your development backlog, which is really meant to be a tidy list of ready-to-go tickets, so much so that any developer should be able to pick something up from that list, start working on it and have enough information and know that it's approved and ready to go, so they can focus on that execution part. They can focus on delivering. The product backlog is something else altogether. The product backlog is a mixture of all the insights and ideas and feedback. These might be insights you get from a prototype you put out there or feedback you're hearing from customers. This is where you're grouping together and clustering different ideas and trying to figure out which problems you need to be out there solving. And this needs to be transparent. This needs to be something that the rest of your team can see into, add to, and help spec out. So, split your backlog into the product backlog and the development backlog, the strategic side and the execution side, to help battle that beast of a backlog that you've got. And as companies grow and mature, experimentation starts to get quite scary. You know, when you're a brand new company, it's pretty easy to just run an experiment. You don't even have any customers, right? They don't care if you mess something up. But when you've got a more mature company, it starts to get quite terrifying. So we're all probably familiar with this build, measure, learn diagram, the lean startup. And it seems simple. It is simple. Except until you've got competition nipping at your heels and tech debt and all this other stuff coming at you. And so your company panics and they start shoveling fixes and features out the door. And they start forgetting about the measure and learn part of it. And they get stuck in what we call the build trap. They're in this build cycle. And so you can get out of this build trap by building in space for this validation and this learning that you need to do. A lot of companies understand this build, measure, learn thing, but they don't actually build it into their space. They have agile sprints that, 2-week sprint, 2-week sprint, but no time in between to actually spend and figure out as to whether the first sprint was the right thing to do in the first place. They just move on and try to get more features out the door. And so you can actually battle this build trap by building in some form of dual track agile. Now, I'm not going to go into this in lots and lots of detail because there's as many ways of doing dual track agile as there are ways doing agile itself. But the concept is that you break up your delivery tracks with discovery tracks. So you use one track or one team or 1 week or whatever it is that you're allocating to it to figure out as to whether you're building the right sort of, test things out, see what works. And then you take the winners from that discovery track and you put those into the delivery track. Those things then go back into the discovery track to check if they actually solved the problem that you went into. All it's doing here is making sure that the team has permission to stop what they're doing and spend time on discovery. And this is something that seems obvious, but it's missing from so many companies out there. And here's another habit that I see a lot of teams doing, which is that they trash their roadmap. And what I mean by this is, let's say you finish something on your roadmap, you have launched that checkout page, so you close all the tickets in Jira, wipe down the whiteboard, throw out all the post-it notes, and start moving on to the next thing. Well, actually, you shouldn't be doing that. You can actually use your roadmap to help track your experiments. So back to the lean roadmap, what I've done here is added in the individual experiments or things or features or things that we're going to try to solve each of those problems so I can keep track of those. And once we've actually finished all these experiments, for better or for worse, we don't just delete this thing and move on to the next thing. Create a safe space for these cards. I call it the validation roadmap, which you can just put off to the side somewhere and make sure that you're spending time going back to every once in a while. Because what you're actually doing is checking, you did so-and-so to hit subjective blue. Well, did it actually work, right? What things did you do or didn't do to actually solve these problems? And it's a little bit like maths class, where you have to show your work. You get half your points for just showing your work. Even if you failed and it didn't change the number, at least you learned several ways of not doing it, so that knowledge doesn't get lost anywhere. So build in this validation side of your roadmap into your processes. And it also helps to remember that you're not supposed to know everything. You're supposed to know less than your colleagues. You're not supposed to have all the answers to everything. In fact, it's supposed to be your job to ask the best questions. The best teams, the teams who are best at experimenting, tend to have really good psychological safety built into their team. And what I mean by this is psychological safety is figuring out as to whether people in your team are comfortable speaking up or pointing out errors in the product or chipping in and helping to define what this product should be, asking tough questions alongside you. Now, how do you go about actually building this into your own team? Because it's kind of a subtle thing. Well, here's a couple tweaks you can make to your language that'll actually help get your team thinking in this sort of safe, psychological safety way. This is one of my favorite phrases, how might we? Because what it does, it turns any issue into a collective problem. It supposes instead of asserts. And it works really well in conjunction with my other favorite phrase, I bet. Because if you're building products, you're going to be wrong a lot. And it can be really harsh, right? So this actually takes the pressure off, because after you've made a bet, whether it worked or not, it wasn't you that was wrong, it was your bet. And now that you know it doesn't work, you're free to move on to the next bet and check things out. So this just helps people feel a little bit safer, speaking up, reporting errors, reporting things that they think will work, outlining hypotheses, things that they want to test. So subtle, but these actually help create a shift in your company towards that psychological safety that you need for good experimentation. And if your company has done anything that earns you any sort of PR or money or customers or anything, you can almost certainly bet that there is somebody else coming after you, a smaller, faster, more nimble version of you, who's looking at the pile of market share that you've got and are coming after you. You're about to be disrupted. I actually like to think about companies on this risk aversion continuum, right? So over here, the nimble and lean, you've got companies who are formed on Tuesday and can pivot by Thursday. They've got a copy of the lean startup under their arm and they're ready to use it in anger. And on the other side, you've got the slow and super risk averse. These are your government organizations and manufacturing and banks and finance and all sorts of stuff like this, right? The behemoths. And these companies, I mean, obviously, it's nice to be on top. They've managed to accumulate a whole bunch of market value and money out there, but they tend to be much more slow moving. And because they're up there making all the money, they can almost be sure that there's always these smaller companies coming after them. The best companies are the ones who are able to have a blended approach here, right? It's inevitable that you become slower and more risk averse as you collect more customers and debt and all sorts of stuff. And yet the best companies tend to find ways of carving out time to be lean. So here's a few models that I've seen that allow companies to do this. I call this one the Google. Everyone's probably familiar with Google's 20% time. They basically give the equivalent of a day a week to go focus on something different outside of their usual remit. And it might seem like a colossal waste of time, except some of their biggest products, like Maps and Gmail and a bunch of others, have come out of this. A whole bunch of failures too, but a whole bunch of really disruptive, interesting products have come out of them carving out this 20% time. Now, 20% might be too much. That's a pretty big chunk of time to just give up to R&D. Try 2% or 0.2%, even a small fraction, a small amount of time towards R&D or trying new things can make a big difference for your company. And the hackathon, it's one of my favorites. It's as good for building team spirit as it is for trying out new products and features. So give your team a time-boxed day or week or weekend or whatever it is you have. Take that time to go try to build something, try to disrupt your own product, try to build something on top of it. You never know, it might actually become something that actually allows you to disrupt your own product and extend your own product lines. The lab is pretty popular with companies who are going through their digital transformations. The idea here is that they're big corporate, but what they've done is they've carved off a team, whether that's 5 people or 50 people, given them the space, their own division, their own startup within a corporate. And it's like a startup, they act like a startup, they don't have all the red tape, and yet whenever anything has the shows promise, they've got the corporate backing, they've got a parent who can actually take that and turn it into a much more profitable product down the line. And finally, the Facebook. I mean, Facebook has one of the world's largest user bases, but they never launch something to everyone all at the same time. Instead, they've mastered the art of hyper-segmentation, launching to just these people in the front row as opposed to everybody in the room. So try to use segmentation, try to use dark launches. And so these tactics are ways that you can actually disrupt your product lines before they hit this decline stage. Your goal is to breathe new life into your products. Done well, it actually extends your product life and adds extra value and might even turn into more profitable product lines down the line. So, beat the feature factory by ditching that timeline roadmap and focusing on solving real problems. Conquer that piece of a backlog that you have by splitting your backlog into the strategic side and the execution side. Learn to love experimenting again by building in that safe place for validation and experimentation. And disrupt yourself before someone else does. That is how you can grow up lean. Thank you very much.
So we are going to press on with our final speaker of the day, and she is someone that I have spent a teeny tiny amount of time with over the last 24 hours, and I am just in awe of her enthusiasm, her energy, and her drive. She was one of Obama's right-hand people for quite a significant amount of time. She essentially set the stage for history, which is just mind-boggling, and I'm so excited to hear her speak, not just about that time, but her current project as leader of the Global Situation Room, which is her new company. She's so many interesting things on the go. Please welcome Johanna Nafka to the stage.
Jess, thank you so much. I have been having fun in Dublin. How are you guys today? Tonight, Dublin? Are you doing okay? Come on, look alive! It's like, why did Casey get this crowd when I really still want to talk to him about what he does? I'm trying to figure it out. Let me take you guys back in time. I'm Johanna Nafka. I was Director of Press Advance for President Obama. Most of you guys don't know what that is. But for 8 years, I had the privilege of setting what you all saw in history. I started with him at the beginning of the Iowa caucuses as part of an incredible, young, motivated team from every different background who really made change happen. First in Iowa, then I went on to South Carolina, then I went on to, actually we went to Salt Lake City before we had to pull down the trip and move to Idaho because the president of the Mormon Church died. I learned a lot about, changing different things, how you create a movement, and how you make dreams reality. I traveled with President Obama to 40 countries, and to more without. And I, along the way, saw him write over and over and over in countless books to countless fans, dream big dreams. It's, to me, easy for people to look back on that and think, oh, it was always meant to happen. This was always, going to be. That President Obama was always going to be President Obama, especially people who are younger and don't remember when, I was entering politics, and the dynamic in the U.S. was that Karl Rove had rewritten the map, that George W. Bush, then the president, was going to forever have a Republican majority, and that there was no way Democrats could gain power. Back in 2004, President Obama was then a Senate candidate, and he was given the honor of introducing John Kerry, so he got the stage. And for those of you who haven't seen that speech, it was remarkable. He talked about America and our shared values, instead of the divisions that we saw, our shared hope, and the inspiration that he had to see a better day. He talked about my little hometown, Galesburg, Illinois. Most of you probably don't know it. It's in the middle of Illinois, not far from the Mississippi River. It's about 30,000 people, and they had lost Maytag. Maytag moved to Mexico. And at that time, Galesburg didn't have a lot of hope. Most of the country, technology has so vastly changed our economies, there wasn't a lot of hope. So at that time, I decided right there in 2004 when I was watching him, I will work for that guy. I didn't get my chance until 2006. He came back on the scene in my world. I had been in Kansas working for Kathleen Sebelius, who was governor, and I moved up to Iowa about 3 years before the caucuses. And I knew I wanted to get on this campaign. It's interesting because when we were talking earlier, I think all the speakers shared this, component, which is do what you love, I think it's sometimes hard, especially if the economic realities aren't there, for you to just do what you love. And so, sometimes you have to back it up a little further and figure out, okay, what motivates me, and then how am I going to make a job out of it? I knew I wanted to work for Barack Obama, but I also knew I did not have the capability to just go do it for free. And so I wanted in the door. Most of you probably feel this with tech companies, right? You think they're fantastic and wonderful and you want to work with them. You want to make their dreams a reality. How do you get in the door? Well, so I figured out who was going to run the state of Iowa, and I figured out a way I would meet him. And I was at a party, and I knew he was going to be there, and I said to him, so you're, coming to the state of Iowa, welcome. Where are you going to live? And he said the 10th Street Lofts in Des Moines, Iowa. It's not very big, but there are more than one places to live. He was living in my building, and I was like, yes, score! So at that time, I decided to do the very Midwestern thing of stalking him. I baked him bread and took it over almost every day. So Paul now tells a story where he knew that, he didn't even have, the president was still considering, he didn't even have an office, and here, this neighbor would show up every day, and he knew that I could hear when he would get off the elevator. And so he actually went about getting off on the 4th floor, a floor below us, walking over and walking up to his apartment so that he would somehow secretly sneak in. Let me just say that I'm smarter than that. So I caught on, and eventually he was like, okay, I have to hire her. And he said, okay, you're going to do press advance. Again, nobody knows what press advance is. I didn't know. He said, you'll be at all of the events and you'll be doing the communication strategy. It was an opportunity in a lifetime to get to see firsthand how you change your dreams into reality. I didn't realize how much I learned when I left the White House. This is back at the very beginning of the campaign. He was much less gray. I think probably I was a little younger too. So, at the beginning of the campaign, those of us around him were all like, yes, we love this candidate. We know that he's the right candidate. But if you knew what was going on in politics at the time, on the Democratic side, it was like, when I told people I was going to work for Barack Obama, it was like, why? Hillary Clinton is going to win. There's no chance that Barack Hussein Obama is going to win the Democratic nomination. And so, I saw it firsthand. I thought, oh, this is just, the pundits saying this. And then I went with him to these events, and at first we got crowds. So Springfield, Illinois, he announces, it was a big crowd, and then they started diminishing. It was kind of like Casey's crowd was diminished. Where did these kids go? I don't know. Like, again, well, they got to come back. They'll get here. The reality is, though, Iowans were skeptical. They were like, this guy's just a superstar, he's just like a YouTube star, whatever, he's not going to be able to bring about anything. And I saw President Obama transform that narrative in Iowa. So everybody talks about our digital engagement. They say we were the most tech-savvy campaign. I don't know if you can see my giant BlackBerry that I'm holding up to my face. Not terrific computers. We were supposedly, the first generation that was using social media, which is true. And we were super digital and engaged. But I have to take everybody back. So that's not how we changed the tide in Iowa. Again, being there at all of these different events, I saw people leave, and they weren't motivated. They would even hear what he had to say, and they'd be like, I'm still considering. I'm not really bought in. And then he started telling a story. We started doing town halls. Every event was a town hall. We started putting them in, uniquely Iowa locations, like show barns. And I remember Candy Crowley once walking into the show barn and being like, no, seriously, they have me on hay. This is ridiculous. So we had these events and these town halls, and people would show up and they'd engage with him. He'd speak for about 5 minutes, do a bunch of questions, answers, and then he'd tell this story early on in the campaign about when he went to a little town in South Carolina, and it was a really small crowd, and they look around and he's ticked off because number one, he's agreed to drive to this place that was very far away from any airport. He's there early, the rain had caught his umbrella, the wind blew it up, he's drenched. Bad story in the New York Times, he would always tell. It was amazing. I would be sitting like right there with all the photographers, and over and over and over I would hear this story. And he would talk about a little lady in a church hat in the back of the room. And she would start yelling, fired up, ready to go. Fired up, ready to go. Fired up, ready to go. And at first he's like, I'm the candidate here, right? I'm running for president. What? Well, she's upstaging me. And he would say, he started feeling a little fired up. And all of a sudden he felt a little ready to go. And he said, in that moment, the rest of the day, he started turning to staff members and being like, are you fired up? I'm fired up. And so he comes back to Iowa and he's like, I'm still fired up. So he would tell the story and he would talk about, if one voice can change a room, one voice can change a state, one voice can change a nation, and one voice can change a world. And he would ask Iowans, are you fired up? And it totally changed the dynamic. All of a sudden you had people standing, Iowans, like, it's a pretty elderly population, standing in their chairs, like, fired up, ready to go! And it was, this amazing transformation. We had offices all throughout the state of Iowa. So, when people would come to our events, it wouldn't be like this where you can just meander in and walk back out. The digital component that we had was we were getting their data. So the minute they walked through the door, we got their email address, and we got their contact information, and we followed up with them. We had field organizers across the state who would rank them and figure out where they were in terms of, are they persuadable? Are they not persuadable? Can we, go through, can we get them? We had rock stars, these high school students who most of whom could not vote. And we engaged with them on a regular basis. It's kind of like your consumers, right? Some touch points where you can enter, and those soft points you can enter, you can change hearts and you can change minds. So what happened was, at that moment, you get into their high school students' heart, and all of a sudden they're going home and they're talking to their parents and they're saying, you have to go listen to this guy, Barack Hussein Obama. He's amazing, And so slowly but surely, we would start getting them saying, okay, I'm willing to listen, right? And then they'd still be skeptical. And then they'd come and slowly but surely, you would transform their mind in not the way that magicians do. That was crazy. But, transform their thinking of, yes, we can. This created this incredible moment. This photo, he's making fun of me. So this was at the Harkin Steak Fry, which was a big event in Iowa. We would, you would always want to show your presence in Iowa at these big events. And so we decided we were going to start with a rally of all of our supporters across the street. So, the morning before, I think I was like hauling porta potties and trying to set up with, it was like, I think the advance team was like 4 boys and me. And I'm like, come on, we're going to get this stuff done. And we did, and they, are encouraging me to. We set it all up. We go back early the next morning, and all of a sudden buses come from every single one of those offices in all of those districts, in all of these places, to a place where we knew we had a lot of oxygen. I talk to brands about this. The way you win campaigns is money and oxygen, whether you're a brand or whether you're an individual with cause. And it's how you use that money and oxygen that's going to indicate how you win. We knew we were going to get press out of this. So there were a couple people who were staged over there. Again, we had this incredible team. It's like family members still. Someone who was standing there and everyone's like, there isn't even a single person for Obama, right? And then we had the Isa Surretts. a drum corps team, start us off, and we started marching over this incredible sea of people. And so at this point, the press start catching on, and they are all like, oh my God, what is this? They're running over, and I'm standing there going like this, trying to push them out of the way. He starts making fun of me and Scout, who's fantastic for this photo. It was fun. At that moment, you start seeing how those voices together really can bring about change. That's the beginning of it. Then you have to engage these people and get them to the caucus. So it's all good to get people all fired up on social media, but you have to get them there and you have to get them to vote. I was with the president on election day, the entire day. So we had done this grueling campaign. I drove 30,000 miles in Iowa in 6 months. It wasn't just me, it was a whole sea of people who slept on random supporters' couches, who did everything we could to see him win. And I remember I was in Des Moines, Iowa, and we were doing a final rally there, and I got the call, you're coming to Chicago, and I thought, okay, I'll do the election polling site or something. I had a walkthrough, and they said, no, you're going to be the press lead for election day, which meant that I was with the president the entire day. The time he voted for himself for the first time as president of the United States on a ballot with his family, I was with him. He had played basketball. I really liked playing basketball. And then we went to a hotel room to watch the returns, not far away from Grant Park. And I remember in that moment, we had done the spray of the returns. We went down, and it was lower level Wacker, this street that was super dark and dusty anyway. And we were, I had all the journalists with me, so I had to get out of the bus and take a phone call. And we'd all been watching the returns come in. And I remember my husband was a journalist at the time. He's in the Associated Press's headquarters in Des Moines, and he called me and he said, you just won Ohio. You're with the next president of the United States. And, I never expected to win. We never took anything for granted. We never thought that because we were head in polls that we had any chance of actually winning that election. To hear those words was not only, mind-numbing, but life-changing. At that moment, I looked around the room, or the lower level Wacker, and I saw this huge swarm of security. And I realized that nothing was ever going to be the same for him, and for those of us who got to be part of that incredible journey. For me, I was so incredibly blessed to take that 8-year journey with the president. I had my son, any of you who were here earlier, while it was during the White House, which again, it took the entire Obama family supporting me to even be able to have that. Of all the cool things I've ever done in my life, I flew over Petra in helicopters. I went with President Obama to Nelson Mandela's prison cell. I went with him to Gorey Island. I came here with him to Ireland. I flew into Buckingham Palace on Marine helicopters. My grandmother had been a war bride from England. Of all the cool things I ever got to do, having my son was the most incredible thing that I've ever done. And I know that these dream big dreams, we need every person in every generation to dream big dreams and to set about that path, the path to victory, so that you can actually get there. I believe that technology is going to change the world, and that most of you who are at the Dublin Tech Summit are going to have a role in that. And I think you need to think about, what you're doing, what you're bringing back to the world, the solutions, whether you want to cure hunger or homelessness or energy security, that you believe in yourself, that you map out that strategy, that you find those like-minded individuals, that you find the diversity of like-minded individuals, that you respect, empower, include all of that team, and that you believe every day that you can wake up and say, yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. I am grateful for the opportunity to be here on this stage today, representing Global Situation Room. We are thrilled to help people dream big dreams, and I'm glad that I got a chance to show how one person's dream really changed the world. Thank you.
Johanna for that incredible presentation, and I think the one thing that's kind of sticking in my brain is that attitude of if one person's voice can change a room and blah 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 blah. It's just yes, we can do this, there's good things coming. And my thanks to all of you for sticking with us for day one of Dublin Tech Summit 2018. We'll be back tomorrow. Doors open here on main stage. I'll be with you again from 9:30 right through to 5:30. Keep your questions coming for any of the panelists tomorrow with #BTS18, and I will see you all then. Thank you so much.